It was a bright morning in the wealthy suburbs, sunlight streaming through tall glass windows, glinting off polished marble floors and golden picture frames. Inside the grand kitchen of an expansive mansion, a scene unfolded that no amount of wealth could ever prepare him. And for Alexander Grant, a millionaire businessman with a reputation for power and control, froze in shock as he entered the kitchen. On the floor, his little daughter, Sophie, no more than 7 years old, sat hunched beside the dog's bowl, scooping handfuls of dry food into her mouth, tears streaking down her pale cheeks. The sight knocked the air from his chest, leaving him trembling as a haunting realization crept over him. Money could build empires, but it had failed to protect the innocence of his own child. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to heal the deepest wounds, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with others, subscribe to Kindness Corner, and let us spread stories that remind the world what truly matters. Alexander's first reaction was disbelief, his mind scrambling for logic. Surely, this was a prank, a childish mistake. But the raw sobs from his daughter and the desperation in her small hands told a truth he could not ignore. He rushed forward, kneeling down, but Sophie recoiled, clutching the bowl as if it were her only lifeline. That was the moment he realized something was horribly wrong, not with her, but with himself. The empire he had spent decades building had blinded him to the emptiness growing inside his own home. Alexander Grant had built his fortune from scratch. Coming from a working-class background, he had sworn to himself that his family would never face the struggles he endured. His company spanned continents. His name was printed in financial magazines, and he lived in a mansion most could only dream of. But wealth had its price. Endless board meetings, late-night phone calls, and constant travel had made him a stranger to his daughter. He had told himself that it was all for her, that one day she would thank him for the sacrifices. But now, watching Sophie eat dog food out of hunger and loneliness, his heart shattered. The truth revealed itself in fragments as Alexander sat with her. Sophie's mother had passed away years earlier, leaving Alexander to raise her alone. But rather than embracing the role of a father, he had buried himself in work, surrounding her with nannies, tutors, and luxury toys. He thought he was giving her everything she needed. Yet, children don't thrive on marble floors or gold-plated toys. They thrive on love, attention, and the simple comfort of knowing they matter. Sophie's sobs were not born of hunger alone. They carried the pain of neglect, the silent scream of a little girl starved not of food but of affection. That day became a mirror for Alexander. For the first time he saw his life from the eyes of his daughter, a giant house that felt cold and empty, gifts that filled shelves but never her heart. And a father who was always absent, even when sitting in the same room. Sophie had begun sneaking food meant for the family dog because the kitchen, despite all its abundance, felt like a forbidden place. She had been too afraid to ask, too used to silence, too accustomed to being invisible in a world filled with glittering distractions. Haunted by the realization, Alexander canceled his meetings, shut off his phone, and made a vow in that moment that would alter the course of their lives. The empire could wait, the boardrooms could survive without him. But Sophie could not. He cleaned her face with his own hands, threw away the dog bowl, and cooked her breakfast for the first time in her life. It was clumsy. The eggs slightly burned, but Sophie smiled through her tears. That small smile lit a fire in him stronger than any deal he had ever closed. The days that followed were not easy. At first, Sophie resisted his sudden change. She had grown wary of promises and gestures, and years of neglect could not be erased with pancakes and bedtime stories overnight. But Alexander was relentless, not with the iron will of a businessman, but with the humility of a father finally waking up. He walked her to school, listened to her stories, sat with her in the evenings instead of staring at spreadsheets, and even learned how to braid her hair, fumbling awkwardly until she laughed. Slowly, the walls around Sophie's heart began to crack, and trust returned one small piece at a time. Alexander also confronted himself. For years, he had worn his success like armor, hiding the guilt of his absence behind the excuse of responsibility. But in truth, his daughter did not need a millionaire. She needed a father who showed up. He began donating parts of his fortune to orphanages and children's shelters. Realizing that too many little ones lived Sophie's pain without the luxury of wealth around them, he spoke less of profits and more of people, less of expansion and more of empathy. Seasons changed, and with them the Grant household transformed. The mansion that once echoed with emptiness now rang with laughter. Sophie learned to cook with him, splattering flour across the counters and giggling when he pretended to scold her. They planted flowers in the garden together, marking each bloom as a new beginning. Alexander learned that true wealth was not counted in bank balances, but in the moments when Sophie reached out to hold his hand, unafraid, unashamed, simply trusting that he was there. Yet the memory of that morning never left him. He would often glance at the dog's bowl, not with horror anymore, but with gratitude. It had been his wake-up call, the breaking of his pride, the moment when life stripped away illusions and forced him to face the truth. Sometimes it takes the most painful images to remind us of what truly matters. By the time Sophie turned 10, she no longer clung to silence. She was lively, confident, and secure, her eyes shining with a joy that money could never buy. And Alexander, once a man known only for his millions, became known for his humanity. He had found success, lost himself, and found redemption in the tear-streaked face of his daughter eating from a dog's bowl. The truth had broken his heart, but in breaking it had also rebuilt him into something stronger, kinder, and far more real. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to Kindness Corner, and sharing it with others so we can continue to spread stories that remind us of love, redemption, and the importance of family. And before we end, we'd love to hear from you. What does true wealth mean to you? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. In the end, Alexander's journey teaches us a timeless truth. Money may fill houses, but only love can make them homes. And sometimes it takes a heartbreaking moment to remind us of the greatest riches we already have, the people we love.